Right. All right. All right. Really excited to see everyone in the chat. Happy Thursday. Um, Today we are gathered today to talk a little bit more about creating high functioning senior teams. And so if this is your first WriteSea webinar, welcome. This is part of our webinar series where we like to highlight amazing thought leaders and incredible change makers across the higher education sector. Um, Today we are joined by Raphaella Prang, um, who is the vice president for student affairs at Maryville University in St. Louis. And today's discussion is going to be a very interactive fireside chat where we're going to kind of really dive into the weeds on creating high functional senior teams. And so we'd love to introduce her. So she is like I said, the vice president for student affairs at Maryville University of St. Louis and a higher education executive with more than 27 years of leadership experience across student affairs, institutional strategy, and organizational transformation. As a nationally recognized thought leader, Rafaela's work focuses on inclusive excellence, trauma-informed leadership, AI integration in higher education, and next-generation student success. She has spent more than 15 years serving as a chief student affairs officer and president's cabinet member, leading strategic initiatives across enrollment management, crisis leadership, governance, fundraising, and institutional culture. So she knows what she's talking about. A first generation Latina scholar practitioner, Rafaela is known for her mission driven approach to leadership and her commitment to building university environments where students can thrive academically, professionally, and personally. She regularly speaks and writes on leadership, student success, and the future of higher education. So we are going to be in for a amazing discussion. And if you haven't met myself before, my name is Brandon Mitchell. I am the co-founder and CEO of WriteSea. I'm a technology entrepreneur, investor, and I'm really dedicated to revolutionizing career services across higher education and transforming the way that students connect to opportunities and making them more career ready. My personal background is that I'm an ex-career coach, but also an ex-consultant. Started my career off at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I advised Fortune 500 companies including Morgan Stanley, Bank of Tokyo, Deutsche Bank, KKR, on complex technology challenges. And I've taken my talents to the higher education space. I've been featured in Forbes, Yahoo Finance, Earn Your Leisure, Black Wealth Renaissance, and I'm very passionate about financial literacy, career development, and I frequently speak on these topics. Actually, this week I was leading a session for the Texas A&M University system at their Student Affairs Symposium in Kingsville, Texas, this week, where I talked about student success strategies, etc. And I hold degrees from SUNY Plattsburgh. And so what we typically like to do when we start our webinars is we want to get to know everyone who is on the call. So we're going to do a few quick polls before we tee up the fireside chat today. And so you're going to see that pop up and would just love if you all could answer it. So the first question, what best describes your role in higher education? So we're going to give about, 30 to 35 seconds for you all to submit that and love if we can get everybody to participate. And so just go ahead and answer that. So the first question is, what is your role and what best describes you? So, okay, so we got some folks coming in. Administration. Okay. Are you faculty? Are you a career services professional? Who are you? Okay. All right. The second question, how confident are you that your institution is effectively tracking student career readiness today? Are you very confident? Are you somewhat confident? You're not confident, or maybe you're just not tracking this today, and you might want to do a little bit of a better job at that. So we'd love to learn a little bit about where you all are at there. So I'll give a little bit for you all to go ahead and answer that question. All right. So we got a lot of career services leaders, a lot of university administration deans, department heads, leadership. And, we're seeing that a lot of folks are somewhat confident. Okay, it's good to know. Which of these risks is your institution more concerned about? Low job placement rates, right? I know we are in a very precarious time with a lot of the headlines. We're seeing a lot of different things. Students parents are very concerned about this as well. Is it low job placement rates? Is it declining employer engagement? Is your alumni processes need to improve? student outcomes not being where you'd like them to be. Which of the risks are you most concerned about? Okay, so we're seeing some of that come in. Declining employer engagement is, I guess, the top right now, or all of the above. Okay, so we have things that we need to fix. So, Raphael, we're hopefully we can address some of that as well. Awesome. Okay. It's really, really, really interesting. Okay, let's go to the next question. Which best describes your current career readiness tracking strategy? Because it's hard to measure what you do not track. And so which best measures that? Okay, excellent. Okay. How open is your institution to leveraging AI automation in career services? And just to level set, RightSea, what we do here, just in case you haven't met RightSea before, is we provide what I like to consider the infrastructure for student career readiness. But we're always curious, right? Are you leveraging AI and automation in career services, something that you're thinking about? Have you dabbled with it? Are you like, oh, absolutely not? So we'd love to know where y'all are at there. Okay. So we see that. Okay, already using it. 57% is already using it. Love it. Some plans, some interested, but not sure where to get started. And that is okay. A lot of times you just gotta have the right mindset. Mindset is important. Okay, what is your top priority for improving student career outcomes this year? Are you focusing on increasing student engagement, better data tracking, enhancing alumni, introducing some new tools? Okay, what are we seeing? Okay, wow. 38% is increasing student engagement. How do we get the students using more tools and technologies, being more active, coming to more career fairs, engaging with alumni? Those are some really, really key things. And okay, yeah. Oh, well, introducing new solutions and engagement, I think, are going neck and neck. Okay. And if we're at my favorite question, or not yet, where does your institution face the biggest challenges today? So I think we are seeing. Okay. Limited staff capacity. So 60% of you are saying limited staff capacity. We understand that. Low student engagement. So say 80% is saying limited staff capacity, low student engagement, which makes sense, right? Students are very distracted these days. They have a ton of different things, classes, their phones, trying to find parking, right? There's so many different things. Um, that tend to kind of lead to that. And then my favorite question before we get started is what is your favorite ice cream flavor? So feel free to drop it in the chat as well as say, I know personally mine is not on here and it's mint chocolate chip. I am a mint chocolate chip fan. That is hands down. We can fight about it. Um, or chocolate chip cookie dough is the top. Rafaela, what's your ice cream flavor of choice?
I'm more of like a fruit ice cream person, so more of like sorbet or sherbet,
Ooh.
something like that, but fresh, like lemon in the summer is great.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we are entering into the summer, so that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, it's always good to get to know who's on the call. We like to really understand who is joining, and as we like to do these webinars and kind of build, just more understanding of who's on the call. All right. So. Before we go ahead and start our fireside chat, what I wanted to just kind of tee up, where we're at right now, and I think why this is really important. And the way I think about it right now is like senior leadership teams are, rarely held back by a lack of talent, and more often the challenge is alignment. And so, as higher education faces growing pressures around student engagement, retention, well-being, right, sense of belonging, and institutional outcomes, leadership teams are being asked to operate with greater clarity, collaboration, and agility than ever before. And because the reality is that, the student experience affects, leadership alignment, whether they see it or they don't. And when teams kind of operate in silos, progress slows, as we know, support becomes fragmented. But when leadership teams are aligned, right, we're on the same page, institutions tend to move faster, collaborate more effectively, and create stronger outcomes. And so I think that's why this conversation matters, right? Because alignment is really important. And that's why we are today joined by Rafaela, who is going to explore what organizational transformation and high functional teams can actually look like in practice. And we're really excited to have that conversation. So we're going to go ahead and begin. So, Rafaela, the first question, was there an aha moment that made you realize that the student life division needed fundamental transformation. Kind of walk us through what you observed when you first arrived at Maryville and how you recognized that the traditional approaches were just not going to be enough.
Absolutely. So I believe that preparation is the best practice. And so I'm going to start with that. And I say that because I was hired to start at Maryville in July. And I knew that I needed to hit the ground running because I was succeeding someone that had been in the role for almost 20 years. And I knew there was a lot of turnover in the division. There were a lot of positions to fill, including positions on the senior leadership team. And so while I didn't start formally on payroll until the end of June, beginning of July, I started making campus visits in February, the February before. And I probably made 6 campus visits and did listening tours with all of the staff that was remaining in the division, even those that were on their way out, to kind of do a SWOT analysis from their perspective. So that was my preparation. And it was really important for me to hear from the people who were living the
Mm.
misalignment, what the misalignment was, so that I could then begin to develop a strategy. And so after those 6 visits, every time I came back, and I was still in my previous role, every time I came back and I started really ideating on what would improve the outcomes of the leadership team for our students, because you're totally right that if you don't have strong leadership teams and strong staff, the students feel the impact, right? And while students are already feeling all of this distraction, as you mentioned, the post-COVID environment, we're also facing that kind of post-Great Resignation environment in higher education, especially in student affairs. That's all creating a lot of this chaos and lack of consistency and clarity. And so it was really important for me to hit the ground running in July when I got to the institution. And the first thing that I did was start to build that senior leadership team. But in those 6 visits I made between February and June, I really heard the same themes over and over from the team. Do you have a strategic plan? No. Do you know what's in your budget? No. Do you know what your KPIs are, what your metrics are? No, there were really no guiding principles or guiding data. Decisions weren't being data informed or data driven. And so people were really hungry, I
Right.
think, for clarity. And it was also really shocking that folks didn't know each other. I would sit in rooms on these listening tours with 3 or 4 staff members who had been on staff maybe for 3, 4, 5 years together, but hadn't been in a meeting together. They had been sitting across campus. There was no trust. And trust is
Mhm.
going to be a big part of this conversation. That's how you start to get that alignment, is people feeling psychologically safe in a space to be able to make decisions that have some risk behind them, because you can't grow, right, unless you have some degree of risk and some degree of innovation. Because I think we have responsibility as new leaders coming into a space. And I really do encourage any new leader that's, moving to a new position in the next year or so to think about that preparation for yourself. What preparation will you need? Just getting to your desk that first day isn't enough. You really need to do some of that preparation prior to, because we have a responsibility to elevate every space that we walk into, because the industry is in a reckoning right now.
Yeah.
And the only folks that are going to make a difference are those leaders that are really impacting student success.
I completely agree with that. And when I think about what you just said, there's a few themes that, are current, right? Like building trust is really important. I think that we forget about that a lot. But like again, when you're coming in, people don't know you. So you have to
Mhm.
start from like an unbiased perspective. But then you also mentioned the listening tours, and I think that's something that I think is really important is that the key word is listen. Doesn't mean you're not saying come in and tell people what to do because of your preconceived notions of what has worked before. You have to listen and kind of gather that feedback. And so just want to dive a little bit into that listening tour piece. I think it's really important. Were there specific metrics that you were looking for kind of by function? Because you think about student affairs, right?
Mhm.
Like you have obviously residential life, you have the dining service, you have career services within student affairs.
Mhm.
You have all these different things. Were there certain metrics that you were looking for, or were you also looking to see if they weren't tracking any metrics when you were doing those
Yeah.
tours?
I think I quickly learned that it wasn't about the metric itself. It was about the exposure to the metric, the knowledge of the metric, and the following of the metric, right? And so I quickly saw that that wasn't happening. I'm a big fan, no matter what position you're in, whether you carry an electronic device or you have one of the old time Padfolios, in your
Mhm.
front pocket of that Padfolio or on your desktop, you have your kind of KPIs, your list of data for your area that you are always tracking. So if you are in a room where someone's asking you questions about your effectiveness, you have it right there to be able to share. And I don't think I met one person on my listening tour that was able to tell me kind of what was in that front pocket of their padfolio, right? What is student retention? They weren't really exposed to those data points. How many events are we fostering for our students? What's the sense of belonging that we're seeing? Is it more or less than last year? What are some of the behaviors in the residential facilities from a student affairs perspective? All of those pieces that weren't really being tracked. It was kind of just putting fires out every day and kind of keep on doing what we're doing and doing more of what we're doing because more is better. And so I really had to reframe when I came in, really
Hmm.
that old adage of it's not quantity, but it's quality of what we're doing. And especially in a space right now where our students are just inundated with information and data and noise, they don't want more. They
Yeah,
want
no,
better,
absolutely.
right? They want, curated to their own preferences, a personalized learning experience. And sometimes that means we need to park all the noise that we're carrying on with to really hone into what the students need. And that was kind of an early driver, a lot of our strategy. And folks were really uncomfortable with that because if you're really busy, busy, busy all the time, you feel like you're productive, right? And you feel like you're showing your value based on that quantity. But when you don't have metrics and data to support that, folks will
Yeah.
see through that to the point that what is the value proposition, right? So I had to really kind of help people understand that we had to have a really big parking lot to start parking things so we could innovate because you can't continue to do what you're doing and innovate at the same time. You've really got to evaluate what is worth continuing, what needs to be stopped or parked, and then where are we going in the future?
Yeah, and I agree, and I draw the similarity to when you think about even AI transformation, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes there's folks that really want to do some new AI, or it doesn't have to be AI technology. Some folks that don't. What I think is always sometimes a helpful exercise, and that is saying like even to your point, like what do you love doing, and what do you hate doing, and then let's take the list of things that you hate doing, and how do you think about let's say for example AI and helping that, and so just really having those conversations to tee up what we're not going to do and what, again, what is working. You mentioned something that I want to double click into around strategic planning, right?
Mhm.
Because strategic plans are a hot topic. Every school typically has one. Maybe they don't. Maybe they have one, but it hasn't really been actioned. Maybe they
Mhm.
said it, a few years ago, and it just kind of went to the blur. So, and it can always or sometimes feel like a checkbox exercise that we got to have the strategic plan. How do you keep, again, your strategic plan, I think is going to 2027
Mhm.
alive and relevant through reports and kind of the data. So just want to move. So now you're here, you start to
Mhm.
think about this. Like, can you talk about that? Like, how do you keep it alive and relevant?
Absolutely. And let me kind of roll back a little bit to something I wanted to mention during this conversation and the fact that a lot of what I do is theory to practice. And one of the theories or models that kind of underpinned the beginning of my leadership journey here at Maryville and in our strategic plan and in our senior team was Cotter's model of change management. And many of us on the call may be familiar with that. But the four tenets of that model are direction, purpose, agency, and trust. And all four of those pieces are pivotal to creating a high performing senior team, but they're also highly critical in a strategic planning process. So when you think about the first piece, which is direction, that's really just setting the table for a strategic plan. And to your point, we had one at the institution and it was flashy and beautiful, and people knew kind of the high level, but there
Hmm.
were no metrics or action steps that were really happening to go along with that. And so what I did is, and there was no strategic plan for student affairs either when I came in
Wow.
at all. And no one really had been exposed to the development of a strategic planning process. For the university, it was very much at that executive team level. So folks in student life weren't really exposed to that. So I
Hmm.
came and I said, okay, let's look at the university's plan and how can we align with that? Because strategic planning does have to have a level of alignment from the top of your organization all the way down. And everyone needs to feel like they have ownership in that plan of the university and at their position level, at their role level, right? So we started with that. And with the senior team specifically, we started ideating around the university's values and goals and how could student affairs and student life really support those. And we came up with four pillars for our own strategic plan. At that point, though, we stopped working at that senior team level and opened up the conversation and strategic planning to the whole division of about 100 people within student life. And so we had a kickoff summer retreat that first summer I was there. said, hey, here are the four pillars that align with the university's plan, but how do you see yourselves in these four pillars? Over the next 5 years, our plan is 2023 to 2027, right? Over the next 5 years, what can we do to advance these four pillars? And how can you help with that as an individual, person, change maker in the organization? And so it took us about 18 months to formally complete the strategic plan. That didn't mean we weren't doing things and creating action steps and following through with them during that time. But it was a very methodical approach to making sure that every person in the division was a part of the decision-making process when it came to all the way down to the bottom of those action plans, right? So every single member in that 100-person team knew kind of where they fit in into the strategic plan, and that really gave them purpose and agency, going back to Cotter's model, right? So we have
Right.
direction with creating the plan. Then we have purpose with how it connects with the university and those four pillars. And then the agency within each role of how I am owning it, how I'm doing it, and helping me see that I'm part of a bigger whole. And that's also starting to develop that trust. Like you're trusting me to advance the division as an individual person as well as within the collective team. And so, how we keep our plan alive now, as we're in our last year, and we've actually completed over 86% of our plan to this point, and we still have a full year left.
That's
And we have a
incredible.
new president and a new university strategic plan. So now we're recalibrating our plan actually to connect with the new university plan. And that's a really important component of strategic planning as well. And you kind of refer to it that sometimes it's a checkbox activity, and really it's a living document.
Yeah,
When you put it
absolutely.
on a shelf, you lose the value of it completely. And so we do quarterly reports, Q1, 2, 3, 4 reports for campus and tell the story about what we have done in that quarter to advance the university's plan, but also our own. We have a data walk annually where it connects back to our strategic pillars when sharing out data, kind of to tell the story through data of what our student experience is. And every time we meet as an entire division and within our senior team, we're doing strategic plan checkups. And we have a metrics document where we are, actually owning what is happening, the deadlines, how we see it coming to life, and how we can report out on it.
Yeah. I love the retreat idea because bringing people together under one kind of vision and time to kind of relax as you guys think about that, I think is key. The reporting piece, right? Because you can't have the strategic plan and not, talk about the success stories, right? And sometimes you got to have like micro things build into macro things, right?
Mhm.
And people need to know that we are progressing against that. Um, as you mentioned the Cotter's model, how heavy did you lean on that framework? And for anybody on that call that wants to adopt the framework, what would you recommend to kind of taking that framework and making it their own a little bit? So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and so for me, when I look at theory, and theory is not a one size fits all approach. And so you do have to personalize it. And quite honestly, a lot of theory came out of the 1980s and prior, where we're looking at a very monolithic kind of demographic, right? About a very homogeneous demographic. And now we're looking at a very diverse workforce and student body. And so you have to start taking some of that into consideration as well. So when you look at Cotter's model, it's much more than those four pillars. But for me, those four pillars were the pieces that I could really start to then drill down on what does direction mean to me at Maryville University in student life? What does purpose mean to my team? What does it mean for folks to have agency? And I would use a lot of this language. And if you talk to my senior team or anyone on our staff, they would tell you that I use those words a lot on purpose to kind of connect back to that model, but also to show what it means to us and it lives within us. And so I think taking those four different pillars, direction, purpose, agency, and trust, and then defining it for
Right.
your institution, for your division, and sharing that out too, because that's also checks and balances for a leader, right? If I'm going to say I'm doing this, I want you to tell me what I'm not. I want you to realize it. I want you to see it in action. And I want you to have the agency and trust to tell me when you're like, hey, I'm not really seeing that agency for me. I'm not really trusting this process. And so we've had a lot of those good conversations about how do we get some folks that are rather detached from the process, maybe folks in entry level roles, or we have athletic coaches in the division that are out on the road recruiting all the time and in contests. How do we help them see their relevance? But those are really healthy conversations to have. But it's always good, I think, to go back to research and evidence-based practices and lean on those a little bit to help you personalize an approach.
Yeah. And just quickly on this, I guess as the results started to show that you're at 86% now. Did I guess student affairs become like the go-to model for like academic affairs or for the technology department? Like, did you start to see everyone say, okay, well, what they're doing is making sense and it's working? And obviously, I'm sure you have your executive meetings and your
Mhm.
cabinet meetings. Did you start to see that happen as well? And then everybody kind of started to adopt the framework for how we think about the planning?
I don't know if I saw it take shape in other divisions that quickly, but what I
Mhm.
did see is the ability for us to be a trusted partner on campus because of the evidence we were showing. And so, what I really saw was the collaboration that we were able to obtain with faculty and instructors and other areas of the institution because I think they saw that we were serious about student
Mhm.
success. We're serious about data and metrics. But most recently, where I've seen it kind of pop up is in our new leadership. Our new president has unveiled this new strategic plan. And a lot of the plan is similar to the way in which we adopted ours. And so I think there's a culture of that growing institution wide, which I'm just really, really pleased with to see that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about zero-based collective budgeting. It's a term that we've seen you use that sounds both revolutionary as well as potentially terrifying. What was the team's initial reaction to examining every budget line item from scratch together, right? Especially when it
Mhm.
comes to things like athletics, where maybe not everyone had the same experience.
Absolutely. I think for some people it was quite terrifying. Something I use a lot in my leadership approach is Gallup strengths. And so we do a lot of work on our top five strengths, what's in our attic, what's in our basement, for those of you familiar with Gallup strengths. And so I have a lot of deliberative people on my senior team, which means they're processors. So when
Mm.
you lay out all of the information in front of them, it's really overwhelming. So we had to first get over the overwhelm kind of just being inundated with the information because these are very large multi-million dollar budgets with
Yeah.
a lot of lines and a lot of expenses to your point that folks don't realize what those expenses are doing and in terms of how are they connecting to student success. And that really was what we were trying to get to was let's collectively make decisions regarding the budget and where we're putting our resources in alignment with our four pillars in the strategic plan, but ultimately how it impacts students positively, right? Instead of just plugging and playing and just saying, hey, we want the same thing every year. We want a 5% increase here. Here's a fixed cost that's going up. It's really about that alignment. And it's really about finding ways to look at the whole as ours collectively rather than these siloed different budgets, right? And so what we then saw emerging, I think that was fantastic, was people were sharing resources. It was no longer, this is mine and this is yours, and I'm keeping mine for survival. Or, I think athletics is all the money, so there's no way I'm going to give it to them because that's usually like a
Hear that all
concept
the
a lot of
time.
people
We hear
have
that
until
every.
you drill down and understand that buses and hotels and equipment and uniforms cost a lot, and those all impact the student experience.
Yeah.
A lot of students come to campuses. Why? Because of their athletic identity, right? And so if we're taking away the opportunity for them to have a fantastic experience in that place where they're holding the most identity in the beginning of their experience before we get a hold of them to have that identity with their academic home or with their residential community or the fraternity or sorority, whatever it is, it's important that that experience is as robust as other experiences they're having across the campus. So when folks started sharing resources, I knew that we had won the zero-based budgeting battle, but it definitely was overwhelming, scary. It got frustrating in the beginning because sometimes folks couldn't defend their expenditures.
Yeah.
They weren't
And that's
actually
tough.
tracking them well, right? And so it was a little embarrassing to say, well, how did you spend that $25,000 on programming? Well, I'm going to have to go back to my team and find out, right? You're going to have to go back to your team and find out. And then what started happening is because the senior team had to be so informed, it ended up requiring them to go back into their offices and departments and start really working on budgeting with their teams, which was not something that was in the culture of the institution here at Maryville. Folks were not really budgeting. They weren't tracking expenses. They weren't looking at what year over year increases were happening or where we were really focusing on priorities, right, from a budgetary standpoint. So I love to see the sharing happening and the open conversations and the questions when folks would be like, wait, what? Like, why are we spending that? Why do we need to
Right.
have this type of insurance or this type of mitigation approach? So that was really, I think, great professional development that is absolutely free, that you don't have to pay
Right.
for. It's not a conference,
Absolutely.
but probably had many better outcomes than going to a conference, right? Because now we're understanding different parts of student affairs that we're not living in every day. We're understanding P&Ls, we're understanding statements, we're understanding what
Yeah.
990s are. I mean, we also talked a lot about like net tuition revenue and other pieces of the institution, housing and meal revenue that folks were not exposed to that gave them a
Yeah.
fuller picture of why are we putting resources certain places.
Yeah, you were shining a light on, key things that, again, to your point, they might not have had those conversations before. Things might have just been, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we've done. Let's just check the box. Let's just continue it. Let's, and again, as part of that professional development, you're increasing the awareness, but also the skill set. So now,
Hmm.
let's say, for example, you're not involved in the conversation, or they do go off into a different department. They can bring those skill sets that, were cultivated under your leadership into wherever they go next. And I think that's incredible. And speaking about professional development, it's one of your pillars as well. And it can be also hard to justify talking about budgets and line items, conference travel and development time, when budgets are tight. And again, right now, even
Hmm.
as I talk to, institutions about RightSea and about, bringing on our solutions to their institution, there's always budgets are tight and things are going on. How do you kind of make the business case for investing in individual growth and, because that builds the collective team strength. And so whether it is a conference that's like a few $100 that it could be helpful, but again, it's not just you have to justify that out, a little bit broader. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So it's really important to me to advocate for professional development funding. So when we go through the university budget cycle, which by the way, I wanted to add that this year was the first year the university started doing zero-based budgeting, and no one else on campus had any idea of what it was. And the senior team of student life was like, whew, oh my gosh, we've done it for 3 years. We know how to do it. It's going to be an easy lift for us. So I think whenever you can create, like you said, new skill sets and competencies for your team, it's only going to help them be a better contributor in the larger institutional landscape or beyond within the landscape of higher education. But it's important for me to sit at the table and advocate for those professional development dollars. But that doesn't mean you're sending people to every conference they want to go to, right? It has to go back to that alignment. Is that conference opportunity, is that webinar, is that travel going to connect to one of those four pillars that we have in our student affairs strategic plan? And how will it ultimately impact students? Are you going to be a better leader because of it, be able to better supervise, and then that trickles down to the student experience? Are you going to learn new competencies like AI technology or other things that are new in the landscape that's going to bring something different back to the institution where we don't have that already existing expertise? Those are important questions. But also, it's not all or nothing. There are times folks have come to me with great opportunities, but the expense is just too much, right? And so what we try to do is, okay, how can we lessen this expense? I always encourage, no matter if we have the money or not, apply for a grant, apply for a scholarship, nominate a peer for an award. I think nominating each other for things that can end up in lower cost for professional development is an awesome way to support each other's professional development. But also looking for lower cost alternatives. Is there a virtual way you can attend this convention versus traveling? Are you willing to pay for your own travel, but we'll do the registration and meals and kind of come halfway?
Yeah.
But I've also become increasingly more of a fan of certifications and badging and skills-based experiences rather than just kind of overarching conventions, large association conferences.
Yeah.
Because again, we're looking to not just hone our student affairs skills, but we're looking to hone skills outside of that so we can be better professionals. And so I do 3-year rolling development plans with my team of where they want to go in the next 3 years. And I mentioned this in one of my LinkedIn posts about the webinar. Up and out is one of my themes, is I'm not doing my job unless the team that reports to me is moving up and out. And a lot of people think that that is a weird thing. It's like we want them to leave the institution. If I have great leaders here and the fact that our landscape of higher education is on fire right now, I want to share those leaders with other institutions that need it. So let's give everything you can give to your current institution. And when you've exhausted that, let's find you a way to get up and out. And so
I love
those
that.
certifications and badging, all that will help that person in their professional growth plan as well.
Yeah, and I think for everybody on the webinar as well, like it's okay to say no, but I love your approach to like no end. Like
Hmm.
no, maybe we can't afford that, but and the end piece is how do we think about other alternatives and other ways? And I think a lot of times we think in a very binary way, like it's just like you could go or you can't go. That's it. Don't
Right.
bring it up again. Where it's like you're like, okay, well, how do we find the different ways to actually, still provide that professional development, even if it is a micro credential, even if it is,
Mhm.
YouTube University, even if it is Khan
Mhm.
Academy or whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
It's culture to care about professional development. I think that's really important. Even at RightSea, when our product managers say, "Hey, I want to get a coach," right? Or, "Hey, I'm looking into can I try out this new tool?" Right? Well, let's not do an enterprise license. How do we start with a pilot, for example? And so even
Mhm.
on our side as a software company, we develop and kind of care about the same things. Just a quick thing. Are there any certifications that maybe you've seen that for anybody who's on the webinar that they might just want to look out for, whether you are a student affairs professional or just in general? Because I know you're looking at a lot of different things. Are there any like one or two ones that you're like, hey, you might want to keep this on your radar?
Well, we are a huge fan of U.com on our campus and from an AI standpoint. And so they have a great mastery, a three-level mastery certification. And so we've had all of our folks go through that so that they can really show mastery in prompting and creating agents and things of that nature at the base level. So I think if you're not doing something like that, where you're starting at the beginning level and moving to intermediate and advanced, I think that's a really important thing maybe over the summer to focus on with your team because we know AI is not going away and everyone needs to have at least a working knowledge of LLMs and agentic AI and all of that kind of stuff, right? So that's one. The other is there are several associations with student affairs specifically that do certification programs. I'm a huge fan of doing that for non-student affairs folks because we all have student folks
Mm.
in student affairs who have not come up through master's programs and maybe have come from outside of industry. So, for example, I've had my public safety staff do that. So they're exposed to student development theory because community policing can really be assisted by understanding student development theory, right? But we don't always think about exposing non-student affairs folks in our staffs to that kind of student affairs curriculum. So I think that's really important. Another example I'll give is how can you find kind of a synthesis between someone's professional goals, personal goals, and benefit back to the institution. And recently I had one of our staff members come to me and wanting a yoga certification because they're personally passionate about yoga, but we have a huge student well-being framework on our campus that we're lifting off the ground. How much do we pay for yoga instructors? If I could have someone on my team who's a certified yoga instructor and provide
Right.
that for student programming, I'm hitting all those things, professional development, personal development, and benefit back to the institution. So I think also looking at those 3-year development plans or whatever kind of professional development plans you have for your senior team, especially, how can you kind of connect that personal but also benefit back to the university? Because professional development isn't just about professional skills. It's about
Absolutely.
motivation and productivity and bringing someone joy because then they're a happier employee and a better employee for you in the long run.
Absolutely. And Raphael, I love your energy. I feel like you go into the room, you're like, hey, this is what we got going on. You come in with the plans and all the things. You seem like you came in, you're moving fast, right? Which is great. And historically, you think higher ed, some people think higher ed moves slow, but I think when you're a leader and you're driving change, things are moving fast. Can you talk a little bit about any of the maybe tools or technologies that you use internally to kind of keep track of all this, to make sure that communication is not just kind of one-sided, that it's like asynchronous, whether it's like Slack or any of the different tools
Mhm.
that helped you balance, like, I guess, this technological, efficiency, but also like you want to keep human conversations and connections there. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So we are a Slack campus, and so that rolled out quickly when I arrived. So it hadn't been here prior to me, but I was an early adopter. We're also an Apple distinguished institution, which means we're one-for-one iPads and Mac users on our campus. And so there are a lot of tools from Apple that we also use to kind of communicate with our students and help them, kind of leverage all of the information that they have. But we have so many different channels and canvases within Slack. If you're familiar with Slack, there are so many tools within that platform that you can use for workflow, for reminders, appointments. I mean, there's just so many things that can help, streamline your communication. And so I have a chief of staff that kind of runs that whole communication flow for us out of Slack between our senior team, but also then our 100 employees within the division as well. And that keeps us on track. We really do not rely on email because we know folks are inundated with it. So we are either doing in-person meetings, maybe short Zoom check-ins, and Slack communications. We meet monthly as a team of 100, and then we meet biweekly as a senior team. That in person is really important because that fellowshipping and creating relationship and checking in on the trust conversation are all things that can't really happen digitally as well as it can in person because we know about nonverbals and all those things, right? So it's important the blend happens for me as a leader, that I'm saving time for folks by doing quick check-ins with technology and using these platforms, but also I'm spending time listening, being in their presence, and making sure that we have a team concept that thrives.
I love that. We're also a Slack team as well. And it's incredible being able to just quickly and
Yeah,
asynchronously
just do
get
this. Yeah.
is
Mhm.
made, quick things, and quick pings, right? You always know when you have your Slack ping coming up. Let's talk about, so this is incredible, but let's talk about, when you think about, again, you're working on the strategic plan and things are happening, but you're also sometimes you get to the point where you're dealing with senior leaders or leaders that unfortunately are not going to be part of the next journey. They won't be part of the next, strategic plan. So let's talk about hirings and terminations, right?
Yep. Mhm.
And you have to make personnel decisions. And even when I talk to our partners that are student affairs leaders or directors of career services or provosts, it's just part of the conversation. And some of these things can be very uncomfortable. Can you walk us through how you involve your senior team in some of those decisions while maintaining like the confidentiality? So
Mhm.
want to make sure that certain people know certain pieces of information, and it doesn't just spread. Things don't get leaked, right?
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about that, like your approach to it, because it's going to
Yeah.
happen. It's something that whether you have made those decisions, if you're on this call, you will. And so we would love to kind of unpack that because
Yeah.
not everybody's gonna be part of that of that next journey, right?
The culture when I arrived was really not transparency, especially when it came to personnel issues. And what I saw were a lot of people floundering to make decisions because they had to make them in a vacuum because they felt like they couldn't share certain information. And it wasn't that they couldn't share, it's that they didn't feel the agency to share and they didn't have the trust to share. And so this was definitely not part of my strategy to begin with right at the beginning because we needed to develop that trust and that psychological safety first and establish that in our senior team meetings of the six of us, that it was vault, right? Anything that happens in that room is strictly confidential, but we can lean on each other outside of those conversations. And so those personal relationships between the senior team members became so important because you need to be able to feel comfortable talking about maybe your pitfalls as a supervisor that led to someone's non-performance. And how do you create a PIP that's going to be helpful? Or maybe how do I have this termination conversation? So I would say about a year in to our senior team formation is when I started putting on the agenda every time we met talent update. And
Mm,
talent update is code for hirings and firings and updates on problematic personnel. And we had a holistic conversation, every single person in the room, the six of us, all talking about folks and how they are performing and how we can help each other elevate. And in some cases, that even led to transfers to other departments because we saw what strengths that individual brought to the table, but they just weren't being leveraged under their current supervisor or in their current role. And so we were also able to ideate about how to strengthen the division differently by moving folks around and also creating a better experience for them as an employee as well, right? So in the beginning, I think folks were a little tight-lipped and didn't know how much to say, but when
right.
folks start saying like, "Oh, you had that experience with that person, so did I." It seems like a common theme. Okay, let's discuss like how do we help this person get through that barrier? How do we position them in a better way to show their strengths or highlight? And I also think looking at position descriptions collectively is really important too, because we don't do that very often in general, just review position descriptions well. And those could be stale. Those could not be connecting to the strengths of the employee. And it's not so much that you want to create a position description for a person, but you definitely want to make sure that they're feeling connected to their role. Because again, if they're not feeling connected, they will not be connecting with students. They will not be working at their best. And so I think we're responsible as leaders to be able to figure out that sweet spot of how do we get the role and the person to fit a little bit better if something's not working quite right now.
Absolutely. And so we have probably enough time for one or two more questions, and then we'll transition into a little bit of a Q&A before we wrap up. And so, kind of big picture, since implementing a lot of these new strategies, right, you've seen measurable results, including increased engagement that we spoke about and comprehensive, kind of wellness strategy. Looking back, I guess now that you've kind of went through this cycle and you're still in it, right? It's a living document. This stuff doesn't change as we make these policies and these improvements. What has surprised you the most about this transformation?
I think the growth in the senior team leaders. I reflect on that a lot because not all of us were new to the institution, but of the six of us, all of us started in our roles at generally the same time. Okay. And so we're all starting from the ground up as a team, but also from all different parts of the institution, all different experiences and backgrounds and years of experience and just competencies. And I've just seen growth in every single person, just exponential growth. And it's not just me that's seeing it. I have folks from across cabinet colleagues that come to me and say, my goodness, blank is a different person, or blank shows up differently in a space, or their speaking skills have improved greatly, or my goodness, we thought you were taking a risk on this person, but now we know why, because that you saw the diamond in the rough kind of a situation. And I always believe that you can teach a lot of the skills-based stuff, but you can't teach someone how to be a good human. And you can't teach someone really be a strategist. So I look for good humans with strategy. And those I think are folks that you can shape and help grow, and the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, I love that. And these are life lessons, right? Like you learn really early on that you can't change someone's character, right? Like you could teach them a new skill, you could bring a horse to the water, but character is something that's important. So look for a good character. Look for folks that want to embrace, want to be
And have
collaborative.
that growth mindset. Think someone that can actually see the future, be a bit futuristic, and not allow fear to hold them back in trying new things.
Absolutely. I just did a post yesterday on LinkedIn that was saying that the future of student success and all these things will be that teams that embrace new technologies and just don't fear it. And so we're talking about whether we're talking about new technologies or we're talking about growth, right? You cannot fear it, right? Fear stands for false expectations appearing real, right? That's how
That's
I think
right.
about fear.
Mhm.
And so the last question, so for student affairs leaders who are listening right now and recognize these challenges, and maybe you're not in student affairs, but you still
Mhm.
recognize these challenges with your divisions and the silos, unclear communication, misaligned resources. What would you say is one thing that they should start doing tomorrow morning to begin their transformation journey? Like what, like you wake up, like you were on this webinar, you heard Raphaella, you heard Brandon talking about this stuff.
Mhm.
People want to make an action, they want to do something. What's one thing you would say, okay, tomorrow, this is your game plan?
A couple things. One is a listening tour, not just internally with your folks, but across campus. And be ready to hear like air the dirty laundry, the negative comments. But I think really saying, hey, I'm sitting in front of you today because I want you to really tell me what you think about my division, about this division, about what's going on, and use that information to really objectively think about what needs to change. And then come back to your team and to do the same thing. So again, going back to our first like 5 minutes in this conversation, that listening tour, no matter at what juncture you are in your position, is so very, very important because you cannot make decisions in a vacuum. Leaders that think they can make unilateral decisions, it's always going to cause fires. You need to bring agency and trust and ownership into every decision that you have. And in doing that too, I think it's trying to determine what are your top three priorities, right? A lot of folks don't even have those written down. What are the top three priorities you have for your leadership, for the division you're working with, for your team? And then everything's got to align under that. And whatever kind of process you want to use to, whether it's a whiteboard or technology or whatever it is, to scope out under your priorities, how then you can get to those pieces, I think is important to really ideate on that, and share that with your team.
Incredible. All right. Well, Rafaela, thank you so much for this incredible fireside chat. We're going to open this up to for questions now. So if anybody is in the audience, if you use the Q&A box, you should see that there. We can probably take, two or three questions. So as that's queuing up, we should talk a little bit more about right? Seeing some other things that we have going on here at RightSea. So, as I kind of mentioned, we do these kind of webinars and bring on amazing folks like Rafaela to really, increase the knowledge to provide just information at scale that you all really can learn from and take from. Our mission at RightSea is to democratize access to career services and to give high quality tools and support to the students and the alumni that need them. We work with 50 institutions in the last 26 months since we've been in higher ed. So we've been growing fast, and this conversation resonated with myself as well as we are bringing on new leaders and new VPs and interns and associates. So I learned a lot from this. But if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what RightSea does, seeing some of our technology, because I think career services and workforce rolls up to student affairs in a lot of institutions, would love for you to scan the QR code, check us out, tell a friend. We do these webinars all the time, monthly. So definitely come back for the next. Um, Also, if you haven't taken an opportunity to join our newsletter, we have an amazing newsletter written by Zaki, who's on our team, who is fantastic at penning these executive level articles and blogs that really bring real issues around student engagement, AI tools, and insights from other higher ed leaders. We have a lot of folks on our newsletter, so we always love for new folks to join. So just feel free to scan that QR code and get access to our newsletter. And then also take some time to share your thoughts as well. So I'll leave this up for a second or two before I transition back into some Q&A to give us a little bit of feedback. Feedback is important as we look to improve these. We also have the webinar page on our website. So if you go to writesea.com, you'll see webinars. All of our past webinars are there. So if you want to see some of the webinars that we've done in the past, phenomenal conversations that we've had. So we're really excited about this. So love feedback. Please go ahead and take that QR and scan that, whether you do it now or if you do it a little bit later from now, because feedback is important, right? You got to make things full circle, right? Needs to come full circle. And then if you do want to connect with myself and Raphael, if you want to drop your email or LinkedIn in the chat as well. This is how you can contact me, Brandon at WriteSea, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do and stuff like that. And Raphael's going to drop hers, and then we're going to transition into some Q&A to see if we have some questions there. So we'll allow for you all to drop some questions in the chat. You can drop some questions in the Q&A box, and we'll love to do that before we end up and close out. So let's see if there's any questions. About a minute or two to see if there's any questions that they have on anything we spoke about today. We went over a lot. It's incredible.
If I could maybe make a closing comment to my student affairs folks out there. This is my second vice presidency for student affairs, and something I've learned along the way, I think a lot of us that come up through student affairs want to be student facing, right? And we really want to keep that student interaction, and that's super important to be present where presence is needed. But I think at this time in higher education, senior leaders in student affairs need to pivot to focusing on their teams and focusing on staff and trusting your staff to do the student facing work that you once were so passionate about and supporting them in that. I think sometimes it's very difficult to be student facing and staff facing at the same time because the needs in both camps are very great. And we can only improve the student experience, going back to one of my first comments, is if we have employees who are engaged and are able to portray those skills and competencies that will influence student success. And that only happens when they have strong leaders supporting them. So that's a lesson I've learned. I still love working with students. I love the interaction I have with them, but I do know that the team needs a lot of support, and I need to be ready to do that as I grow in my career as well.
I love that. It's really important. So we did get one question from Maria D. Let's see if we can answer this live. Maria said, hello, could you please repeat the name of the open source AI cert course program that you recommended?
U.com. So go to U.com and they have a mastery program through their platform that you can utilize three different certificates, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And they're very skills based, and I think really helpful in helping folks kind of get that basement level understanding of prompting and creating agents specifically.
And is that YOU or
Yes, it's you.com.
okay,
Yes. Hmm.
U.com? Awesome.
Hmm.
One more follow-up question. Maria said, I may have missed this, but which AI influenced processes have you all used to increase student engagement?
So we do have a lot of analytics that we use, but something we've been focusing on because we have a wellness framework right now that we're really trying to lift off the ground is use of visual intelligence to predict and react to student behavior. And so we work with a company that helps us overlay our camera technology on campus so that we can really understand the behaviors of students and how they're engaging so we can respond with appropriate programming and intervention. So that's kind of where we're at right now using visual intelligence.
That is incredible. She's very interesting. Visual intelligence. Yes, y'all
Mhm.
are doing some amazing things. And it's important to try new things,
Mhm.
innovate, being because again, like you can't stay stagnant. And right now we are in a massive technological revolution with everything AI across all different, parts of higher education, from voice AI that we're building to call students when they
Mhm.
graduate, to AI career services, to AI visual stuff, wellness strategies, AI financial literacy tools, AI tools for enrollment management, and so all things can be shiny, but sometimes again, you got to try things out because if you don't try things out, then you won't have the data to talk about if things work or it didn't. So always,
Mhm.
tell higher education leaders to always be in a spirit of innovation
Curiosity.
and curiosity, right? Because it's
Mhm.
important. to move the needle forward. But also sometimes, folks are like, hey, if it's not broken, we'll fix it, right? Um, but
But
that
the world will move around without you, right? So it's important to be in the game always. So I think at least putting your toe in a little bit and having some competency in that is important as we move into this new era.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, Raphael, thank you so much for today's amazing webinar. We will definitely try to have you back as well, talk about something different. But we really appreciate your time here at WriteSea, and we are going to close out. So thank you all for joining today's webinar, and please keep track of what we're doing. We post on LinkedIn, and we'll have a few short form videos about this webinar that we'll kind of cut up and put out. So you'll see that on LinkedIn. And we will be in touch. And so I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Thursday and weekend, and please be safe.
Yes. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, RightC.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.